This is Uncharted, a series of candid conversations about facing uncertainty. When we are called upon to be courageous, the strength of our leadership is tested. Red Direction has developed a library of resources to help you stay aligned, and in particular to develop your true north. Now, here's Jess.
Welcome to the first Uncharted. Tonight, I am talking with Jen Olson, who is the founder and CEO of DVLP Solutions, which is a business and leadership accelerator. It helps people boldly and unapologetically make more money, increase their influence, and get massive results, all the while making change, huge change in the world. Jen, I'm really glad you could join me tonight for the first maiden voyage of our program. It is what business is. And that's actually, it's more than what business is, it's really what leadership is. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is how our leadership shows up in these hard times. And for anybody who can see the video here, I'm going to totally fess up. Right before we started, I was crying. I had a hard day. It was crazy. I needed a little bit of a break. So what did I decide to do? I went to take a walk. But there was so much tension outside that I came home more stressed than when I left. And then it was all downhill from there. Because what do you do when you're really stressed and you need to get unstressed, but all there is more stress?
That's what we said it before, but I want to say it again. Thanks for being courageous and vulnerable. Cheers, friends.
Cheers.
Because it takes a lot of guts to do that in the boardroom, right? With
Right.
partners or on a podcast. So
Right.
Congratulations on being courageous.
Thank you. A little tear goes a long way. I've been thinking a lot about what this Uncharted is and this swirly mess. And of course, everybody's thinking about the swirly mess we're in now, but really we face little ones and big ones every single day. And I think what we're really into right now is this concept of these new rhythms. Have you faced any of that?
It looks really different for different people. Some folks are going underground. Some people are hyper performing. Some people are pretending to hyper perform and then like completely disintegrating when nobody's watching. And some people are still in the in-between space of, no, I think it's okay, or is it okay? I'm not really sure. And everything in between. And, whether that's leaders or moms or dads or, caregivers, like all sorts of people are in that whole range, frankly. And I don't know, I think we need to give each other a lot of permission right now and a lot of grace to just show up and be, because none of us have been here before.
And everything is kind of bumping up against each other. I'll tell you, I'll be completely honest. After all this stuff started happening here in Boulder, Colorado, what ended up happening for me was I'm like, oh, I'm at home. And I was like, I really hate being at home. And then I had to go off grid and I had to indulge. And I played my favorite game for 3 days straight. And it was funny because when I started, I'm like, oh, I'm really going to do this. And about 2 hours later, I'm like, I'm really going to do this. 2 days in, Ryan noticed, was really surprising. I don't know if I was hiding it or he was just totally doing his own thing in our house where we're all staying right now. But he was like, oh, you're playing the game? I'm not sure I like that, Jess. And I'm like, I don't think I do either, but this is where I'm at. So here we go. Yeah. But the good news is, it passed because I was willing to be with it and be really with that emotion of whatever that emotion was. I can't even tell you the emotion. I just knew I needed to do something that apparently was brainless and that took up my time and didn't allow me to really grasp what else was going on for just a few minutes so I could get my bearings. It was almost my way of getting bearings. So for everybody who's not here, I'm sure it happened similar for you. We had no warning, and it was within a period of like 2 hours, stuff started to escalate from the first thing to the time school closed. Done.
So for us, that really started with the notification that the schools were closing down on Thursday night after they had been in school all day, right? So Friday, no school anymore. So it was just done. Like there was no grieving. They couldn't say goodbye to their friends.
Right?
Done.
They couldn't get their stuff.
Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And we're like, well, what do we do?
That's right. Well, what is it that the parents are supposed to do in this time? So I don't know what you were doing, but my kids went on spring break a whole week early because, why not? So they did, they were in the crazy kid land, and I was like a crazy person helping my clients through the shutting down process of their companies. So there's a great juxtaposition happening in that moment.
This is how mine went. Oh, well, they canceled everything that related to after school activities, which includes Girl Scouts, and I'm a Girl Scout leader. And so I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I have a Girl Scout leader meeting. This is Thursday morning. I have a Girl Scout leader meeting, and I'm going to go ahead and go because that's just, I'm the president of the service unit. So, okay, we'll do that. We have this meeting, 4 people show up. Usually we have like 25. And so we have this great dinner, and all of this is what you were describing is going down while we're having dinner. So nobody's talking about Girl Scouts. We're not even having a good time. We're all like, what's happening? Do we need to leave now? How do we get the checks? We went someplace we could have dinner. We're in the middle of dinner. And it was super fast. And everybody's had a situation like that before where you go into a massage, or you stop to take a run, or you shut down to have dinner with yourself or your family, or to just have some focus time during the day at work, and you come back and everything is blown up around you. Everything. And so it sounds like, I want to know how you showed up to this everything blowing up.
Like, for good or bad, throughout my career, I'm known as this person who has been unflappable, right? And early in my career, that meant that I had a really good suit of armor that was pretty tight, and I just internalized the crap out of stuff, really, is how that worked out, which really was not so healthy as you can imagine.
Been there.
Right.
Been
Not
there.
so healthy.
I'm at the other end where I cry now.
Right. I had that as well, right? Like the
Yeah.
involuntary tears. Yeah. So now I can say that I actually can ground really quickly for, and be really present immediately, and I do so to try to hold the room down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing a lot of heavy breathe, like a lot of belly
Not
breathing.
like this. Not like you just ran. More like focused attention breathing, not exercise breathing.
And actually what was quite beautiful at one of the places I was at, who I'd been working with their leadership team, one of their leaders requested to do a centering exercise and meditation before we had the meeting, which was beautiful because you could feel the energy of chaos and panic. And then as people then focused in the meditation for, it only took like 2 to 3 minutes, but the energy just fell beautifully to a more palpable calm. And then we were able to, be a lot more present in the meeting. So like, there it is in real time, like a moment that you were hoping for. That was beautiful.
You had to have helped set that up somewhat on your own, specifically because you had already started to indicated that you're breathing, being conscious of the type of breath that you're having. And that's pretty amazing. I'm thinking about that, and there was a point in time I was that way, but that was totally against my nature, Jen. My nature, well, and so when all this went down, I was like, it really can't be this bad. I was totally going to be closed to the whole thing. That it was really this bad, and that I was going to be forced to do something along with a whole bunch of other people that I didn't want to do, because that's just anti who I am. I don't get to be forced to do anything. Let me show you. And I also ended up doing a lot of breathing. And really, even though all that had happened and schools here had shut down, there was a retreat that I really wanted to go to. And and for the safety of my family, I was like, well, I have to talk to my husband about this, and we have to make, not only am I doing this for myself, and of course it's going to make me a better person and show up in my business better, but I have to think about the fact we're all in the same house now all the time. And so we had to come up with some sort of a go forward of how do we interact with this outside world And how much do we want to interact with that outside world? And what does our rhythm look like? And the more I thought about that, the more I thought about it to like focus time in our day in our office. Many of us practice that, right? Once a week, I go into this thing called a present retreat, and it's 4 hours long, and I shut out the whole rest of the world. And all I do is assess the business, dream about the business, and evaluate what's going on. And I use a SWOT. What are our strengths? What are our opportunities? What are our weaknesses? What are our threats? And I'm looking at all of those to see what direction that we're pointed. And that's all we've done, just on a slightly bigger scale, with being at home right now and everybody being at home. And now it does change how we work at home. Don't get me wrong about that. 4 hours is really hard to find to myself on a regular day, let alone on a day when my whole family is in the same place that I am. Yeah, right. But at the same point in time, it's like, well, I already have a precedent for this in my workflow. And I'll bet you do, and I'll bet our listeners do too. How do we get that focused time, that dedicated time? And can we use that as an anchor in a time of chaos to go, okay, I still can focus, even if it's just for a little bit, so that I don't lose it. I don't lose that focus.
Yeah. I feel pretty fortunate in, as an entrepreneur, having not as long as you, but I've been at it 5 years. And that was something that I learned pretty early on, that if I didn't have a schedule, if I wasn't getting dressed, getting like really ready, like shower, clothes, of something besides pajamas, if I wasn't showing up to the office, then I wasn't nearly as productive as I could have been. And so I've structured my days a lot, like just like I did at the office, right? I'm in between 8 and 9. I work. I then take a lunch break. Now, what's awesome is I get to walk in my neighborhood in the sun, which is amazing. And then I'm here till 5. That being said, I'm transitioning a lot of folks who've never done it, who have, toddlers in their space, folks who just have dogs and and partners and parents in their space. I'm seeing lots of people use their decks in a beautiful way in terms of an office environment for Zoom calls. And I think, the best part of it is really trying to figure out, for each of us, like, what do we want our day to look like, and how can we carve out time without any judgment of what it looks like. If you can get away from that, right? Some of us are going to be a lot more productive at 10 o'clock at night because the kids are down. And some of us are going to be productive at 6 to 8 a.m. because that's what works for our biorhythm. And, that's when the house is quietest.
It could also be when the kids are on online school.
Right.
When that happens. Right? For those that it happens for, that's not going to happen for our family. But I mean, honestly, I want to throw that in there because, yeah, we're talking about what are our biorhythms, what are our realities of the commitments that we have, and how do we use those to our advantage?
And like, how can we be really gentle with ourselves, right? Because every single person I've talked to, we've talked about spouses in the environment, we've talked about parents in the environment. For most of us, we haven't actually been home that long in terms of the stay at home. But the cracks in the veneer are happening already around, I don't know how I'm gonna make it, with just being around my family this long. And none of us have done that before, right?
Does that speak to our priorities and our values? Those cracks in the veneer? We think we've set values, but really this is a chance to look at them a little closer. Because I know this is the best thing that has happened to me. Carter, my son, is after, it's been almost 2 weeks now, there's a calm about him that had not existed before. And we're a cocoon again, right? From like when he was 3 and now he's almost 9. And so recognizing that what we value is eating together, is being together, is to have activities together, both planned and impromptu. And how does that look when we're at home so we don't have to commute anywhere? We technically have less distractions because nobody's walking into our office, but technically we have more because the people who haven't seen us in a long time want to see us more because we're here. I mean, it's an interesting, there's this, I'm going to just call it out. It's a love-hate relationship. Whether our values are aligned or not, there's still this period where we have to go through that love-hate relationship and figure out how to love it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do we do self-care when people are all in our space, right? And we're trying to figure out what our days look like, whether it's family day or work day, right? Like we were joking about, I joked with you and I joked with like several other people. I'm like, did we schedule our pee breaks between the Zoom meetings that we have going constantly, right?
Not me.
Right.
No, I was like, oh, I don't have to go anywhere. Oh, I forgot I actually planned going to the bathroom before meetings, but that was in my drive time.
That's right. Or how close you get up to folks as you're eating.
Yes.
Right there.
And then there's beautiful things that happen too. So here I am, and I've had a heavy work week this week, in working with companies that are in the middle of transition, like what you were talking about, the making sure that my team is okay and that everything is going on, because we've always been remote, but that while that helps us work, the way that this is hitting different people in different parts of the country, and somebody on our team is in Europe. I mean, Eva's in Europe, and so how that is impacting everybody and what that looks like in their own individual cities, it's a big burden. And I worry as a leader that I'm not giving it enough time, or I'm not checking in with them enough. And how do I make it so that it's not the focus of everything, but how do I get it off of people's chests? So if we paused for a minute before we jumped into a meeting, because like the meditation, which I love, we may do that at our next meeting because it's a fantastic opportunity to really settle in and just be with each other across space, even though we're not in the same space. And there's something to be said. People discount the space between us. And it doesn't matter if it's right here, like we're sitting at the table in my office over there, or here where you and I are across a computer, and we're actually physically not that far from each other. I mean, right. We get together and have dinner.
That's right.
And at the same point,
hopefully again soon.
Yeah, I know. Fingers crossed. You know, right. You're going to be the first person I call when I can get out of here, right?
Okay, I'm up for that.
I say that as an extrovert. If that was not a clear sign that I am an extrovert.
We here at Red Direction can only fund programming with the financial help of our supporter listeners. To learn more about the additional benefits and value supporter listeners receive, go to reddirection.com. Now, back to Jess.
Okay, there are two really hard parts for me, Jen, and maybe, I don't know if you can relate or if it's different for you. The first part is I am incredibly extroverted. And this, as much as it allows connection, I'm also tactile, and I like to hug people, and I like to touch people on the shoulder, and I like to see their eyes, and I like to be in physical proximity with people. I am that extroverted. That was the first thing I was going to say. And the second thing is I'm an incredible empath, and I'm learning how much of an empath I am. Not just empathic, like I'm sensing the energy around. And that's also turning out to be, even across the screen, that's actually turning out to be sometimes a hindrance. And so I get to look at myself and go, okay, well, this is a part of who I am. And how do I want to relate to it? Do I want to, if I don't relate to it, I'm going to end up drowning. If I don't relate to it, it's going to knock me down and kick my butt. If I don't relate to it, I lose my true self, and the actions that I take are now out of alignment with what is important to me. And I think that's the hardest part in this, because everybody's crazy, and I've got to stay sane, not only for me and my family, but for me and my staff, for me and my larger community when it's out there. Blah.
I feel a little guilty, honestly, because I do not feel very impacted by having to stay home very much. I can be extroverted, but I also really love my downtime. I live in the middle of a country area where there's lots of space. And so it is not that different from me. I'm not going into clients, but I'm kind of loving it. actually. I get to spend a lot of time with my family. I'm on Zoom a lot with clients. And like you, I am a big empath as well. And I think a couple things on that. I can't say enough about self-care and owning where we are in the moment for us, because I don't know about you, Jess, but I see a lot of leaders who are trying to like figure out how to show up for others right now in a lot of different ways. One of my clients is doing food distribution for all of their families, so they are out and about, um, and being in contact with everybody. And then, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of different things. So the self-care and also owning how we're feeling in the moment and having a safe place to drop that big old load off, I think is important, for ourselves, and especially for those of us who feel really deeply. Um, Without that self-care, we're kind of screwed, really. We really are. And you're right, you can totally feel it through a screen, and everyone's really like energetically heightened right now. They're like big sounding boards. And if you give them a little bit of encouragement, the panic comes up really quickly for a lot of people.
Yeah, and we're in a place where we're in a community and a society that prizes ideas and collaboration more, and I shouldn't say more. On one hand, we prize that, and on the other hand, we prize results. And leaders within an organization that really have to own our own personal leadership, we're in a place that has never existed before. I mean, it's always been a tough place, and we've always had to maybe move between the two. But in this place, what I hear you saying and extrapolating on that is that place of, come on, put on your own mask first, and then help other people, is more true than ever before.
The organizations I'm seeing most successfully deal with this are the folks that had a really solid leadership team. They may or may not have a great leader at the top, but they had a solid leadership team that as this stuff started happening and crumbling, everybody started working together and having conversations around the table about how to show up and how are they serving and all the different components of the business. And so the intellectual capital was the people sitting around the table talking about how to handle the crisis, not just one person. Everybody had to show up as their own leader in that moment. But the best ones so far that I'm seeing, and I don't know if you're seeing the same, for those who have that luxury of the team and that it's a good team, that's important, that it's a good team. They seem to be weathering it much faster and much more cohesively than other folks.
And let's define good team. A good team is going to be where everybody understands the role that they're in, understands what they're responsible for. And one of those roles is the person that owns the culture of the company, the person that owns the vision of the company. And that person has to be, I mean, it's almost like a V of geese. They've got to be the point of the V of all the geese flying. Otherwise, the team is they're all expending energy and going in every different direction, and there's no organization. So yes, the luxury of a good team. Yes, the importance of that collaboration to get to results. Yet in the end, somebody's got to say, do it. Somebody's got to say, so how does this look? Somebody has to say, well, if we were in our office, it might look like this, but what does it look like now? And how do we do it now? And asking for the accountability that existed in an office and bringing it into a different kind of space amidst all of the other priorities and distractions and the new rhythms, which takes time. I mean, I'll be honest, I think I'm one of the people that takes the longest time. If you ask any of the advisors of Red Direction, when we decide to make a change, like months later, they're like, are we there yet? And I'm like, oh yeah, look, this is exactly where we're at. And here's why. For me, it's not like I can't just cut and run. If I've been on a path, and you might be similar to this and you might be different to this. If I've been on a path and I've made commitments and it turns out that path needs to adjust and make a change, I'm not going to undo my commitments because I still can provide value and deliver what needs to be delivered. I can have our team do the same. And then as those things are coming to an end, not only have we had a chance to think about something else before taking a turn and making an adjustment, but we're able to seamlessly continue to fill as we're going forward what needs to happen in this new way. So it's almost like having a baby all the time, where you know you're going to have a baby, but you got to wait 9 months. Now I don't have to wait 9 months. but I do have to I have to wait more than 9 days.
Absolutely.
There's an in-between in there. And
That's right.
Here would be my one big takeaway for everybody today is, what is that time for change for you, where you're really solid in yourself? You know what's coming, you know what has to change, and you know what is, and really being able to move. And however fast or slow that is, doesn't necessarily apply to the size, and there's no expectation. And I'm going to come back to the self-care piece of grace that you were talking about, Jen. We have to give ourselves grace to allow the integrity of our companies to exist as well, because they're an unnamed being that we have to take care of and foster and honor all the time. And with no voice, sometimes it takes a little longer.
Absolutely. Well said, right? And sometimes that is even longer than 9 months, right? Sometimes
It can
big
be.
change, right, can be really long. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think grace for ourselves as leaders, grace for those who are working with us, right? Especially in this climate, right? There may be toddlers and dogs and all sorts of things in the background, as people are showing up in their best self to do the work, right? A client of mine, their best phone call was actually one where it was like one dog in the background went off, and then everybody's dogs went off. They had to mute everybody because it was a total dog chaos moment. But they said
the dogs had their own Zoom too.
They did. And the staff said, hands down, it was like the best meeting ever for them. But those things are going to happen, right? They just are. And I think like we can roll with that, and we can still really be productive in our companies and make sure that we're headed in the right direction for what we need to accomplish, and have the flexibility, right? Because I don't think any of us know where it's going. There's a lot of different companies planning for a lot of different timelines, and it's not in the next 6 weeks either. So
I know this is the biggest marathon that so many people have been running together in the form of business and leadership in business to this point. This concept of uncharted, I want to know from you, Jen, what has been the most unexpected thing? And it doesn't have to be just right now, right? I mean, yes, we're in a weird, chaotic, swirly time. But what is the most unexpected thing that you have done or faced in your career?
I was the head of an organization. It was complicated structure. It was a foundation that was part of a larger group. And there was kind of an unrest happening with one board against the other. And I kind of got caught in the middle of it. And there was a lot of duplicity and a lot of just really hurtful things that happened. People just really behaving poorly and trying to take one organization down to the benefit of the other. And they don't, and that was in an organization that was, I don't know, I'm on an animal theme in the last 30, a little less fit.
It's okay. That's what's showing up today. We're in.
We're in. But it was in an organization that was like, these folks were veterinary specialists. They helped animals in the most beautiful way, and to act so frankly shitty in a lot of different ways. That probably was like, I think all of us have war stories, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. So I don't know that was the lowest, but it was one of them.
Knowing that was one of them that was really tough and messy, what did you do? I mean, how did you navigate it?
So I left one bad work situation to go into this one. and the energy of the previous one really just followed, right?
Oh,
Like I
interesting.
attracted it. Isn't that amazing? Unknowingly at the time.
Same
I was,
situation, different scenario.
yeah. And you know, I was really on an infancy path in my personal development. So I wouldn't have had any knowledge of that at the time. So was I doing my best? Absolutely. And boy, did it show me like what you can attract when you're not mindful. So I think personally, that was a catalyst of me starting to think, hey, you need to do way better for yourself because this stuff is bullshit, frankly. And it's time to think about how to keep yourself healthy because this isn't okay. You know, I showed up my best, but it came at a really high personal cost. I almost lost my marriage. I wasn't showing up for my kids. The benefit of all that was, you know, I also realized that at some point I wanted my own business. So that was the beginning of that, which was something I'd never considered before. And really it was because I just like, I wanted to see leaders who were doing better, who knew how to be better. Because my experience was so rough for so many years around really poor leadership. And unfortunately, I just got taken down with it.
What was the biggest thing that you learned that helped you with your own personal leadership from that time?
So I grew up in a family business. I was surrounded by men. It was like a put up, shut up, no emotions, kind of, you know, like the old story. So I was really, really good at hiding a lot of things, and there was a lot of layers of armor to that. So I think the biggest turning points for me was not like you, but similar to the experience you had at the beginning of this call.
You mean
My bo-
showing up going, my face is all red and I'm blotchy because I didn't have enough time to finish crying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My body at some point said no more, and that was my response to everything, and I had no control over it whatsoever. So from going from a hyper control individual to like a mess all the time, that was super vulnerable, and I just had to learn how to sit in it because that was the best path forward.
Right.
And
Well, you have
I would
to.
say,
We
yeah,
cannot, and I'll just put it down, hands down right now. We cannot move forward or make any change until we're willing to sit in it. Until we are willing to feel whatever that feeling is. For some of us, it'll be fear. For me, it's acceptance or a good enoughness. For others, it's going to be, you know, it could be just sadness. It could be, here's the story I've been telling myself. What I hear you saying is something showed up and said no more for you.
that's right. It was certainly a forced moment, right? Um, and I would say the second thing at the time is that I found out how to be in my body differently, to manage stress differently, which came through a meditation practice. But when I could actually be in my body in a healthy way, instead of really blocking out everything, it really shifted how I could show up. It shifted how I was managing emotions, and it allowed me like authentically to own my space and to be able to tackle things that were happening for me in a much different way. So that to me was really pivotal in terms of really just showing up as a leader. And the outside of that was it really heightened, you know, the buzzwords, it really heightened my presence, right? My physical presence, and my ability to be present. But that was the external parts of it. You know, the other was, you know, I was able to self-regulate in a way I never had and ground in a way I never had.
I hear you. I hear you. What was so with that being the takeaway, so I'm curious about, like, you know, we were talking about some things not being as long as pregnancy, but some things being a lot longer than pregnancy. Since we both have children, I think we can use that as an example. 9 months. How long on that scale was this revelation, the sitting in it, the decision to go, okay, I have this thing that's new. How am I going to show up and relate to it? And what's next? How long did all of that take?
Like, I feel like I master one layer and the universe is like, cool. So let's see if you can do that with something bigger. So I left that job, and I would say I was really close to a breakdown at that point, and that was like the pivotal moment. Um, I was in practice doing that stuff really solidly for a year, and a year in, my family had a horrible car accident, like a rollover at 80 miles an hour with every member of our family in the car. So my husband was pretty badly hurt. So like I got to find out, like, could I do it? Could I really like live the moments that I had been training for, right? Because there's very few things in life that, except for maybe now.
Well, you got a point. Yep.
There are moments, right? There are moments we train for, right? This too is one of them, that really show you whether or not you have it or not. And I would say, so that was a year in, and I didn't have all of it, but I certainly had enough that I was able to keep above water and in a good frame with it. And I've been practicing ever since, for sure. Because it's always,
it's
two
always a
steps forward,
practice.
1 step back. Yeah.
I can appreciate the word practice, and I love it, because just because we know it and we can move on, sure, that's true. Yet every situation is enough different, even if it has similarities, that we're being tested, we're reinforcing, we are supporting, we are growing, or not. Can you imagine the more painful path had you resisted instead of deciding to do?
I think all of us have places in our life where we resist, and then places where we have more patience for the practice and allowance, right? So I can imagine from the places that I'm still resisting, or what I think my resistance look like, it feels very much like a chase, like I'm chasing answers, or I'm chasing solutions instead of like really accepting some of the internal wisdom and then taking other data points and coming up with something else. So I think we've all done that in different areas, right? I think.
You are not alone. You are not alone. And earlier, in the program, you mentioned that it's only been now here in Boulder County. Now, you're not in Boulder County, right? You're next to us. You're in Weld County. So we'll just go with Colorado in general, because there were enough counties that said, hey, we're not happy with this. We're going to make some change. So the whole state said, these are going to be some restrictions. Well, we had exposure in our house to COVID-19 right before school was canceled. And I went to this retreat that had people internationally and local people, even though it was not a large number of people. We still had that as well. And somebody had sneezy, cold, fevery stuff happening. And even though we were practicing distancing then, right, we had this thing where we've been in our house well before Colorado said you got to be inside. We've been inside. So in some respects, I feel a couple steps ahead, which is why I think my vacay, I was like, oh, look what showed up for me, right? I got forced into this thing that I have no control over, and how am I going to react to it? And at first I was like, whatever, that's just what I do. And secondly was, wow, this is real. Now what? Third was, I got to figure out how I'm going to show up to this, and I'm just not, so I'm going to check out. And fourth was, this is pretty awesome. And here's what it shows. I had to go through the first 3 steps to get to pretty awesome. And if the first 3 steps were how we show up, and those are cracks in our facade, right? And I know you described that in your previous scenario too. There were cracks in your facade, or the facade that you had, or the mask that you were wearing. And because it wasn't as brisk and as decisive, it took a little longer to show up, which by the way, I have those in my past too. And I'm thinking about everybody right now who can't even think about what they've learned from their past and bring it to the table and say, look how much stronger I am in this situation because of what I came through. That we just have to own those things. What is our process going to be to get to the acceptance of, wow, and I'm going to still use the word awesome. This is awesome. And what does that mean? And how is awesome? It's not what we wanted. Nobody likes to not be around the people they work with. Nobody knows how they're valued when they're not going through and showing up in the roles that have been given to them. Nobody knows that. But guess what? That's what a leader does every single day. They're in the role of this thing called leader, and they have leadership that they want you to, that you choose to follow if you're in that follower role. Yet at the same point in time, the person at the V of the geese, if I'm going to keep the thing, right? Geese at least have a way to know internally what direction they're going. We don't have that. It's up to us to build it, just like what you were saying in your story. You built it, you became aware of it, you practiced it. And then when a situation showed up that was crazy, unexpected, and horrible, how did you show up to it? And you were like, hey, I can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think a couple tools, you mentioned one of them, like for all of us, whether it's us as individuals or leaders of an organization, right? I think you had asked how in that moment, how you go through that. As the head of an organization, I don't know about you, but I have my mission and values all over the place and in every single meeting I am doing, right? As well as
now, is it for
objectives.
you or is it for the organization or both?
Both.
Yeah.
Both, sister.
I always have, I don't have a mission written out, but I have my values that show up everywhere. And I have my overall purpose. Maybe that's my mission.
I was going to say the purpose is interchangeable
mission,
for person. Yeah, for personal,
yeah.
It's purpose. I don't know about you, but with the organizations I worked with, that was the first thing. I'm like, okay, so here's the mission, here's the values. So given that, and yes, we had these strategic objectives that we decided to pull out before we knew that there was this, massive change in the market. But given our mission and values, how do we want to show up for our customers, for our clients, for whoever, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, anytime, it doesn't have to be a time like this for the whole world. It could be a time like this within your world. It is okay to be able to go back and say, that strategic plan, it's very clear it's not going to work for us. And we are going to go through fire to get there when we can see that there might be a path that we can get there without that. So what is the most important for us? What is the most impactful for us? And for some organizations, what is the most profitable for us? And can the leadership team not only bring their values to the table, but set their own ego aside and hold the mission and the values of the organization to determine that path? That is where the real unknown actually is.
I appreciate you said for some organizations profit, but I would argue, as somebody who's worked in a lot of nonprofits, that I think everybody actually should be looking at profit.
Cheers to that.
Because, if we want to make real impact in the world, whether as a socially driven social profit or socially innovative business, or as a corporate traditional business, or as a nonprofit business, you can only get wider and bigger impact through profits, because it is the tool that helps leverage for you.
I love that you said that. I just know that there are people that listen to our show that are like, I don't care if I make a profit, I can break even and I'm happy and I'm doing the work that I need to do. And there are other people who are really working hard and they have a ton of cash and they're trying to figure out, do we keep the cash? Do we do something with the cash? And I'm like, those are all great questions. And the people who are like, we're doing our best work and we're breaking even, I have questions for them. So are you really doing your best work? What more could you do? And what would that take? Because I think not profit, whether it's breaking even or not in a business of any kind, we're in a comfortable chair. if we're not thinking about our bottom line. And that is our first clue to the fact that when we're faced with some sort of uncertainty, that we're going to have these little cracks, and we're going to work harder to hide the cracks in the mask and the facades that we've put up than it is to actually be able to show up fully.
Not to call out people, but I will, because that's who I am, and in a loving, kind way. I meet a lot of folks who are entrepreneurs and small business owners that, they are there in service, and God love them. They come from a very heart-driven place, and I am all for them. It is going to take a different kind of leader to really tackle all of the problems this world is going to face for our generation, for my kids' generation. Like, whether we like it or not, money is the engine that makes it go. And the more money, the more you can do.
Do you want to know something?
Yeah.
The first several years of my business were like that.
Yeah.
Because, and there were cracks in my facade around that. I couldn't face them. Right. So, I mean, they show up everywhere. We have talked about so many different things that I know whoever's listening in at this point is like, they had at least one butt pucker through this entire thing. Oh, that's me. Oh, really? Oh, maybe I don't have to think about that yet. Well, just look at your comfortable chairs would be my comment. Look, just recognize them, because until we're ready, right? Until we're ready, we're not gonna. So we're either playing or we're not playing. We're showing up or we're pretending to show up, and the not playing and the pretending, I think, take away the most from what we're trying to accomplish. Because we all have a reason to contribute here. We all have something bigger than us that we're a part of, whether it's our own business, whether it's, we've joined somebody else and then they're in a business for the greater good, profit or not, for profit or nonprofit, I should say. Let me be very specific on that. Yeah. It's totally true. All right. So out of all the stuff that we've talked about, I'm curious. Is there anything that's like standing out to you, or something that is bubbling up that hasn't been said that should be said right now?
This is all about how we live in discomfort and what our built up resilience as leaders and as people is towards that discomfort, whatever that is, whether it's around our business or how we're showing up in our own vulnerability, or at times of crisis, or times when it is perfectly normal and we're in our safety net. It really is about how are we sitting in that discomfort? What is our resilience to it? And how are we taking care of ourselves so that we can come out the other side?
You heard it here. This is Uncharted, and all of the things that we talked about, while we went into a lot of different places, while we covered a lot of different ground, we went pretty deep, and there are connections between each of the places we went and the depth that we reached. So as you've listened, my request of you and my challenge to you is to find one crack in your facade just from this conversation of where in a past life, in a past situation, or what you're facing right now is a crack, and honor the crack and look at it and treat it like you would a pimple, for goodness sake. Just come on. You got to own it. It's going to take its course. You can do all kinds of things. You're going to have the red spot on your face for a certain period of time, or your neck, or wherever. All I know is there's a journey through it, and be with the journey through it. In the end, it is all how we show up, because when it's uncharted, that's when we are truly tested, and that's when you know how much your effort is helping you show up right now.
We here at Red Direction can only fund programming with financial help from our supporter listeners. To learn more about the additional benefits and value-added supporter listeners receive, go to reddirection.com. Chart your own course by taking advantage of Red Direction's Unstuck Quick Consulting Services and our vast library of information on the website. Visit reddirection.com. Remember, preparedness and the right perspective is absolutely necessary when you find yourself somewhere uncharted.